In reality, procurement secures supply, manages risk, protects margin, enables innovation, and increasingly shapes the strategy.
Tomorrow Today. Nachgefragt bei CXOs.
Welcome to Tomorrow Today, the Accenture podcast where we explore how today's decisions reinvent and shape businesses of tomorrow. My name is Johannes Dölle. I'm part of the leadership team for sourcing and procurement in Central Europe, supporting our clients to reinvent procurement. Procurement has long been a function focused on cost and efficiency. Today, it sits at the heart of resilience, sustainability and innovation. That's why I'm especially pleased to welcome one of the most profiled procurement leaders. He has worked across the globe. He is procurement native, shaped by years of experience at the core of the function, looking beyond existing boundaries of procurement. Welcome, Nikolaus Kirner, CPO of SAP.
Yeah, thanks Johannes for having me. Great pleasure here to talk about procurement, probably a bit of a undervalued, underrated function, so even more important to getting the right attention onto that one, and looking forward for our talk.
Nico, you have initiated major transformation throughout your career. If there were one process in your private life that you would love to automate just as much as procurement, what would it be?
That's an interesting one. I don't have a direct... Probably my backhand at tennis. If I can automate that a bit better, that would make my day. But despite that one, looking backwards in my career, my private life, I think I'm quite happy with that one.
Then you're already one step ahead of my tennis techniques. Well done. Nico, the well-known iconic strategist Peter Drucker once said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, it is to act with yesterday's logic." Nico, today's global volatility redefines the role of procurement, and we see a lot of them, especially in these weeks. How have recent macroeconomics developments influenced the role of procurement?
If I look back, 5-6 years, COVID kicked in with a lot of supply chain disruption that where it probably started that procurement moved up the ladder and got much more attention. Supply chain disruption, then inflation kicked in after COVID. It was all about margin protection. Then a Ukraine war starts, again, supply chain disruptions. Then the next one was tariff, Liberation Day of Trump, which is as actual as currently we see that as well. And all of a sudden, procurement right center stage of juggling various balls 24/7, and plenty of my peers on the procurement side really worked hard and tried to fix supply chain, drive innovation, protect margins, drove on the sustainability agenda. So what we have seen and what you could also see on the board side of things, procurement is more center stage than it used to be. And all of a sudden, yes, a function is waking up and getting the right attention. A colleague of mine said it, we've been a defensive mid-player in football terms, and all of a sudden everyone talking about the holding six and how important the holding six is important, and the likes of Kimmich and Frankie de Jong, you mentioned those. All of a sudden you're going to get the right attention, and probably that's what procurement deserves as well, despite doing a solid job for many, many years.
We also see that on client side in companies that procurement needs to bring this value to the table of the board. Management is more and more asking to bring this value, and this is absolutely that what you are saying. Procurement becomes more important not only for cost, but also for innovation and sustainability. Absolutely right. When we look now into the direction of SAP, from your point of view, how does it reflect that the global organization approaches supplier markets and its ecosystem partners during these times of volatility?
From the SAP side in itself, a few priorities, of course. First of all, building up a resilient supply chain, building up a resilient ecosystem around the supply chain. AI center stage as an absolute priority to really drive, and I think we're going to come to that one later on as well, to really drive the efficiency and the effective benefits of a proper AI and leverage that as much as possible. And at the end of the day, driving value beyond savings, which is innovation, which is risk management, which can be sustainability. etc. I mean, there's a few risks coming up. If I think about regulations, many regulations, if I think about LKSG in Germany, CSDDD on the European side of things, if you think about DORA in the financial industry, so lots of regulation coming in, which we need to properly address and create absolute transparency across our supply chain, which is a big topic for us. So all in all, quite a few challenges, but plenty of good opportunities, because if you're going to get everything right, if you have a proper data model, build that up, then all of a sudden, if you create the transparency, there's a lot of opportunities which we can use at our competitive advantage and do our bit towards the corporate strategy. Yeah?
Yes, I know the SAP, especially the procurement function, has always been at front stage for innovation. When you look in today's multiple target environment of procurement, what is your perception? What's the best way to balance cost efficiency, sustainability and innovation in organizations?
And I think that's probably what we do in at SAP as well, looking more longer term perspective by building up a strong global ecosystem, a global network, working together with strong global players, where then you can working much closer in a more collaborative ways instead of the pure opportunistic, I gonna optimize line item by line item, rather working on shared roadmap, on common goals, on shared goals, defining common strategy, and then you can leverage more the long-term perspective and also creating much more long-term value in sort of purely short-term opportunistic topics. And then, of course, you have the usual stuff. If I think about stock units, stock keeping units, you're going to build up one or the other buffer across our supply chain just to be on the safe side. I think that's what we all seen and that's what we all do, you know.
Yeah, a long-term strong strategy for sure also enables organizations to be stronger in these times of volatility. When we look at SAP, and you have mentioned this long-term aim to work in procurement, what are the major planning pillars you see in your organization as those which influence the next months and years ahead?
I mean, first of all, we discussed about what the environment is. At the end of the day, you have an increasing regulation. You got an ever-accelerating technology development. You're going to have changing business models. If I just thinking about SAP and how we were working over the last weeks and months on a sovereign cloud proposition, what does it mean from the procurement side of things? These are the kind of imperatives where we need to look at that one. So what are the planning pillars? First of all, and I think I mentioned that one, AI first, that is center stage. How can we leverage Gen AI propositions, the agentics AI into our processes, into our operating model? That is definitely center stage. That means on the other side, for our own people and for the workforce, you need to do some sort of upskilling. You need to have a skill transformation. And you need to attract one or the other additional talent as well. And last but not least, yes, you need to adopt your operating model as well. Of course, how can you build up a more agile organization to serve internal stakeholders better, faster, but also leverage all of the opportunities you see on the outside suppliers world in the ecosystem, that you better leverage those accordingly. So that probably are the key pillars, and we are right into our Vision 2030, and that's exactly all of the questions we currently try to find the answers. On top of it, what's the overall value proposition? What are really, we said it before, and what's the value beyond savings, which goes more into the direction of a partnership management.
What interesting is in procurement, and I always love that, is working in a network of people around the globe, and especially by so many different topics which you can address working in this area. Also, SAP operates in a global scope of clients, partners, ecosystem partners, and also suppliers. What difference do you observe between procurement organizations in Europe and maybe also in other regions around the globe who perceive these differences of targets, of roles, and also what you have mentioned in terms of mid to long-term strategy? Do we share the same vision globally, or do we have here differences?
First of all, in SAP terms, I'm in a lucky situation that we are running since 20 years a global procurement organization, which is, and I've seen, I'm coming from different industries. I worked beforehand. I have one global system, I have one global process, and a really top-down, clean core process architecture, which makes life easier because we are all trying to really standardize, simplify towards a single global standard. Therefore, I'm in this lucky situation. But yeah, you still see one or the other difference, regional differences. If I think about, of course, a more impetus in Europe when it comes to regulation, when it comes to sustainability topics, then you're going to have probably in North America a function and a team which is more at speed, looking at scale and drive innovation a bit more faster, less probably thinking about regulation. I would say they're not thinking about compliance, but hey, once in a while, innovation speed is more of a priority. And on the Asian side, if I think our strong workforce in Bangalore as well as in Shanghai, they're really digital first, digital natives, and they think the way. So that is good to having a diverse team. We're having a global organization. For example, all of our categories are run by mixed regions in a central global category organization and get the different views into a single team, and that delivers the best result. I think there is an overall direction towards the more strategic direction when it comes to business partnering, this kind of ecosystem orchestration. So I think there we are all working towards the same direction.
Yeah, it's interesting to get all these differences and impacts from different perspectives into one organization, especially in these times when there's change about AI, about regulations, as you have mentioned that, and that's the different perceptions across the globe in this organization, especially when it's within one team, one organization, and this diversity also brings then this different perspectives and maybe also then additional value for each of the clients in each region. Yeah, so today we perceive that as a reinvention about workforce, and digital workbench, what you have mentioned. This is really what reinvention is about, all these perspectives. If we take then a closer look at artificial intelligence at itself and this transformation with it, how does this reshape procurement? As we are seeing a lot of different perspectives today, from singularity solutions to end-to-end solutions.
I think 3-4 years before Gen AI kicked in, we were talking about 3 big directions, and they still hold true. The first one is what you call in procurement terms P2P, procure to pay, becomes automated. We all talk about the touchless PO, and I think with AI, yes, we are much closer towards the touchless PO. I think we're going to deep dive into that one later on when it comes to agentic side of things. We're closer towards the touchless PO. Then the second stream is source to contract becomes predictive, which is well right. I think with digitization and the AI, the whole price finding mechanism gets more automized, gets more fact-based, finding the right prices. So therefore, yes, source to contract becomes predictive. And probably the third pillar, what we said 3 to 5 years ago, the whole supplier relationship management becomes proactive, which means things like you're going to have transparency across your supply chain. You're going to have more data aspects around supplier performance, etc. And then you can react or even act in a proactive way with your suppliers and making the right decisions and making the right corrections if necessary on a supplier side. So that still holds true. And of course, with that one comes a lot of effects on the one hand side of more efficiency. On the other side, of course, of a much higher effectiveness and having more intelligent answers and intelligent, smarter decisions than we used to have at the end of the day.
Yeah, you have mentioned there 2 effects, efficiency for sure, effectiveness in terms of processes. When it comes to decision making at the end of any analytics, or maybe in the beginning, it shortens the time frame to make a fact-based decision, as you have said. What drives then the decision-making process even further? Do we get to a point where machines are then replacing the human decision-making? Is that an iterative way forward? How is your perception of this point after the automation, more efficiency gains than to the human interaction when it comes to decisions?
Yeah, of course, there is no one size fits all. And then let's probably deep dive into one or the other process. As I said, on the P2P, procure to pay, I think we're closer towards this touchless PO. I think you will see, and partially you see them already. If I look at our Intromas, our co-pilot called Joule, yes, you can already start first demands. I need simple categories. I need to have that and that demand. Please order me something like that. And then you see a touchless order going through up to the invoices. I think we are close towards that one. So on those side of things, you will have already quite a high degree on automation. Then if you look on the agent side of things, source to contract, again, a few topics, sourcing agents. We have the first simple sourcing agent where in simple terms, and that's happening by the day. On the more long tail, simpler, smaller vendors, you can start automatically via a sourcing agent. Simple things like payment terms negotiation. You can do a huge amount of suppliers in a short period of time done via the agent, all via negotiation bots, via email conversation. That's happening as well. But of course, if you're going to have more complex sourcing situation, multi-dimensional sourcing situation, where it's also about quality, where it's over cost, where it's about different solution, then of course it's more a hybrid model where of course the Gen AI is helping you to doing a fast bid analysis, a fast bid comparison, which a much higher pace as we've seen, even 2 years ago. That's already happening that moment in time, but of course you still need to look at that one. And for the more complex things, for the big, more complex sourcing events, that will still be there for a couple of years. You always need to have the final decision with the human side of things. On the supplier management, yes, highly automated when it comes gathering all of the performance management data. When it comes to supply chain transparency data as well, but of course then to put these information into physical actions of how do you discuss certain things with your vendors, I think therefore you will always, for a couple more years, having some human interaction. So in a nutshell, transactional stuff will be highly automated. For the more complex one, yes, AI is not replacing the human, but they're working hand in hand and the work will be slightly different, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. When we look at all those changes and bringing that to life, many projects are initiated. A lot of companies perceive a missing tangible result in all these AI projects, especially AI projects. From your point of view, what are the key challenges and benefits of those increased digitalization, leveraging AI in procurement?
Let's start first of all with the benefits. I think we touched on that one as well. Huge efficiency gains when it comes to the transactional stuff, smarter decisions. And on the efficiency, probably let me quote you one example, because that was just, I had a conversation with a few CPOs 2 weeks ago when we discussed about how when Trump announced the Liberation Day on the tariffs, we were all sitting there and we were all asked by our board and supervisory board, what does it mean for our company and how much additional money will it cost us? Things like we would have worked for 4 to 6 weeks 3-4 years ago. And now with the right help of Gen AI, I think we could turn around in a certain type of 24 hours. So these are efficiency gains, but also effectiveness gains that you're going to have smarter decision making. That was really eye-opening because we just were sitting in a room and everyone told a bit of war stories, but of course also how they leverage the Gen AI on the thing. So a huge efficiency, but also smarter decisions, fact-based decisions, more neutralized decisions. That will be the case. But what are the challenges? I think probably 2 to 3, I guess. First of all, and of course at SAP, I'm in the lucky situation, and this is where we're also trying to promote towards our customers having a proper standardized data model. Of course, the more centralized you're going to have the data, the more you can leverage the AI. That is not necessarily means purely for the spend data. That could be even further by, leveraging, HR data together with spend data. I'll give you a good example. Our laptop ordering catalogs, when I started there, we had pretty much each single laptop across the globe in our catalog. And now, of course, after COVID and supply chain issues, we standardized that further. But of course, there's still a bit of demand from the developer. I need to have the high-end machine, etc. And now what we're doing with the help of AI, of course, we can leverage the HR data with the spend catalog data, and we see which job profile, which employee is entitled to what kind of laptop, and that is going to be automized. So you can then customize that in a highly automized fashion. So having the data into a central place is absolute key, and therefore, yes, best of suite is king, because the moment you're going to have the data together, you can leverage not only purely on the spend side of things, but you can play around with customer data, finance data, HR data. This is one of the biggest challenges I think many procurement departments facing, especially if they have a fragmented system landscape at the end. The second one is the whole around change management and how to bring your workforce onto AI agenda, that they're really picking it up. Of course, we did simple gamification contests. Of course, who is doing the best prompt? How do we set up a prompting library? I was singing and dancing about my best prompts I've did at the beginning. But this is absolute key. How do you bring the workforce towards the new world at the end of the day? The third one, yes, of course, it's all about how do you still define, control the AI and having some sort of an ethical AI that you're going to make ethical decisions with the help of AI. But I think before we start regulating, I'm rather a fan of really go all in and really playing around. I think that's where many companies are at that moment.
Data is the foundation, and bring it all to life, giving that a sense, a direction. Why is that what we are right now seeing in companies taking place, with which long-term target? And I think you have mentioned one interesting point, that the workforce needs to also go with it and support the change. And these examples which you have already also mentioned is that in the past you have worked or could not even work on some data sets because data was so complex and maybe not available. And today's technology is offering this analytics. And so you are coming away more and more away from assumption-based to fact-based decisions, what you have mentioned. So fully agree. And this interaction between workforce and technology is one of the critical points to drive this change. And this is then the point when it comes to these interactions, and especially getting in this direction of fully automation, where it also is in between and augmented solutions. How do you see the boundary evolving in the future between augmentation and really getting to a fully automation?
I think we touched on that one, and probably need to look at one process by one. As said, you're going to have a few of them which will be soon going to be fully automated. Another will be some sort of a hybrid model. And therefore, the question is, of course, what does it mean then for the workforce, and how do you need to upskill your workforce? Are there new skill sets to be developed? Are there new roles to be developed, etc.? And of course, we tried coming out of our strategy workshop. First of all, due to automation, all of a sudden, yes, you're going to have plenty of capacity, which we can leverage for the more strategic one. The strategic stuff on ecosystem development, on supplier development, on discussing with your key partners, innovation, investing into network orchestration, that you better match what's the internal demand, that you translate the corporate strategy towards procurement strategy, that you all of a sudden you have some free time to really drive the more strategic agenda. But of course, you need the right skill set for that one. But what are the new skill set needed in the world of AI? And I think we came with 3 roles. The first role is what we call the data gardener, which is really specific now. Where are the data, where are they sitting, and how could I get access towards the right data, which is, I think, at the moment, not that really existing on in the procurement departments, with a few exceptions, but rather sitting in the IT, but this will become a super important role. The second one we call the domain expert, which is all those guys, and probably I wouldn't call them dinosaurs, but those who knows really the core processes of procurement when it comes to sourcing strategies, Porter's 5 forces, chessboard, you name it, all you know the theory, know the processes, and of course how best to leverage and translate that then towards what the third role will be, the so-called agent builder. These guys who are really then building and permanently look at the agent, how to further improve them accordingly. But the good news is these agent builders not necessarily sit in the IT department in the future, but they will sit in the procurement side because, let's face it, building agents will be relatively simple. So therefore, it's good to have it all under one hand. And these three personas working closely together will really drive procurement department forward, building stronger, wider agents talking to each other and driving, at the end of the day, value for the company.
Interesting insights about the way forward, how you see this developments. And I agree that as it gets closer to cost zero, developing agents, the ability of building it and filling it with right data and the right knowledge how functions as procurement are running becomes more and more important, as this not necessarily be then a technology topic itself anymore, but the technology knowledge must be embedded into the sourcing and procurement departments itself to drive that even further with deep understanding of these processes. And I fully agree with that. Brings new roles in the organizations, new tasks, and therefore also new chances for all in the team to go forward. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end of today's podcast. Bringing all together, we can close inspired by Peter Drucker again. The best way to predict the future of sourcing and procurement, so to say, is to create it by yourself. Thank you, Nikolaus Kirner.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes, for having me. It was a real pleasure and exciting times ahead for procurement. And to close that one, we at the moment talked at the beginning about a holding 6. If with the help of AI and all of the opportunities of driving value beyond savings, moving up a bit more forward, not so much as a tenor, but probably slowly moving forward in our midfield. I think I'm not worried about the future of procurement and really looking forward for the upcoming years and to really use this as an opportunity. So thanks for having me.
Very welcome.
Hat euch das Gespräch gefallen? Dann folgt jetzt unserem Tomorrow Today Podcast, um zukünftig keine Episode mehr zu verpassen. Accenture. Let there be change.